Hello, ladies and gentlemen. As with any game predicated by numbers, the meta around honkaistarrail revolves around taking numbers to its highest point for the player. With this in mind, a natural result was a community of people that wished to achieve these higher numbers and decided to go deeper and learn knowledge you otherwise wouldn't get just by playing the game. These people are called theory crafters, and what they are doing is theory crafting, the process of analyzing mathematically the most optimal tactics, strong interactions, and deeper strategies. One of the results, and really the most popular result, are spreadsheets, often called calcs to share with the public. Calcs are used as proof and by very nature serve many useful functions, comparing builds, comparing team setups, comparing gameplay loops, and comparing characters against each other. However, as anybody that ever created a basic calculation will tell you, it is never perfect. The flaw of calcs comes from the fact that it is entirely built on assumptions that is conducted by the creator. Even if the creator's assumptions seem reasonable, there's many fluctuating factors of endgame that makes it inaccurate. And if they are unable to take this into account, which everybody does since it changes too frequently, then it isn't indicative of true gameplay. This is why calcs always have disclaimers, since it can lead to destructive ideas among the community that isn't true and leads to the good old underhype, overhype, or the worst case scenario, doom posting. This doesn't entirely mean that all calcs are invalid. It's still a useful tool, but it starts to get worse with complexity and is bad at showing the bigger picture. This is the Jiaoqiu Theorem, and today I will be showing you examples of units that have shown time and again that calcs aren't everything. Before starting the example section, I feel the need to bring this up. This will not cover direct misinformation or lack of context calcs. A prime example of this is something you may have heard before. Black Swan is 10% better than Sampo. A surprising, or I suppose unsurprising, amount of people took that at face value and became a running meme. The reason I'm not including this is because it was information that was taken out of context. This fact is only ever slightly true in single target, which was not only Sampo's best scenario, but Black Swan's worst scenario. The calc itself wasn't actually too wrong. It showed a realistic enough result. It was the fault of the interpreters that spread biased results. And you can't really blame a survey team if someone took your results out of context to serve an agenda. No? But anyway, onto the real examples. If a calc can give the best performance of a unit, but that performance occurs the same amount of times you get hit by a lightning strike, is that calc really worth anything? Calcs are meant to simulate performance of a character under certain parameters, with as much accuracy as possible. While the accuracy part, as said earlier, will never be 100% correct and there's margins of error, some units are so bad to simulate that calcs can't show an accurate performance of gameplay and requires the luck of the gods to do. This is Qingque's entire identity. Due to the sheer randomness of her gameplay, calcs for her can either go extremely bad or too good compared to a real run, with various middle grounds you can land into whenever Qingque gets a turn. Though her performance has a definite floor and has a definite ceiling, trusting calcs for her performances compared to others is oftentimes a really bad idea, because you'll likely never see that performance in the first place due to so many RNG factors on top of her innate one. The floor is too unlucky, the ceiling is too lucky, and the middle ground has a large margin of error. Of course, you can still judge her value based on that fact alone. If Qingque's best that only has a 1% chance of performing is only slightly better than Acheron, would that make her technically better than Acheron as a positive form of endorsement? This isn't a real example, by the way, just a thought exercise of the value of a unit like this that goes into some feels crafty territory that relies on the eye of the beholder. In that way, calcs aren't everything, because Qingque and in general various elements of game RNG won't allow players to capture calc performances in real play, making calcs not a be-all end-all of a unit's value that still requires other forms of analyses. If a calc is completely accurate and shows the best of a unit is worse than others per their specialized scenario, does that make them a worse unit in general? In honkaistarrail, we have 3 game modes that show wildly different scenarios. Memories of Chaos is a mixed bag that has okay blessings. Apocalyptic Shadow is break-based, strict on elements, and has good blessings. Pure Fiction has strong blessings and is an AoE constant smackdown of small enemies. Each game mode has the reliable destroyers since they are so well tuned to the game mode's environment. Acheron can reliably destroy MOC since they are so strong against any enemy target counts. Firefly is entirely identified by top-of-the-line break damage and brute forcing weakness types, making her a pure AS monster. Jade can reliably destroy PF, since she's so strong against AoE she can brute force through really bad blessings. So where does our subject, Yunli, go into this? Well, she's worse than all of them. Yunli is a counter unit and by definition still has her power locked through enemy speed and is never the best. Because of her ult heavy damage, it means she performs well enough in AS. Because she's a counter, she works well enough in pure fiction. And her ult scaling makes her versatile enough for Memories of Chaos. Does that mean Yunli is a bad character because she's strictly worse than these characters? No, it's actually the opposite. Yunli may not be a Jade in pure fiction, but she will beat Jade outside PF almost every time. Yunli may not be Firefly in Apocalyptic Shadow, but she is much better to use in pure fiction outside their weakness type at lower investment and has wider team selections. Yunli may not beat Acheron in Memories of Chaos, but there are fights that Yunli can melt easier for more comfort, whereas Acheron can't do it as reliably, especially at low investment. This makes Yunli a great pickup for a common player type, the newbie which needs a reliable, low budget, good carry for the least amount of resources. Even if Calcs say she is never the best option for a specified scenario, her consistent performance gives her an edge over many meta units that don't work as well outside of their specialty. In this way, calcs aren't everything. To gain a better picture of a unit's value, you can't just rely on isolated calcs between units to judge them, but their general versatility in teams, enemies, and situations is equally as important for their value in accounts. For our last subject, check out my previous video on Jiaoqiu at his pre-release to see my opinions. Most of it hasn't changed, but I think you should check it out if you want to know my credibility or call me out for hypocrisy. But anyway, if a unit was calced to be a small increase over a cheap predecessor, what else could they make up for it? Acheron is one of the strongest units in the game, and I don't think that is a controversial opinion. With her selection of Nihility supports being admittedly worse than Harmony units by a good margin, and still being an amazing unit, the next unit had a lot to live up to, but had an easy potential of breaking the game. The solution was Jiaoqiu. In concept, in calcs, and justifiably in theory, it seemed like Jiaoqiu was such a weak upgrade. Sure, he can battery Acheron's ultimate faster, but it overlaps with trends, a preservation light cone as a 4-star alternative. Yes, he can increase vulnerability, but at max strength it's barely better than Guinaifan's, who has the same element, toughness damage and skill point use for a lesser price. His DOT isn't impressive either unless you have him E2, and can't even detonate burn like his 4-star alternative. In every other team that isn't Acheron, he wasn't beating out Ron Mei, Robin in their designated teams either. Why would you ever want a unit like this? Jiaoqiu may not be a math significant upgrade to Guinaifan, but his comfort of having his vulnerability up the entire time and front-loading it means he will have consistently better performance, while Guinaifan has issues against more situations leading to larger performance gaps. Jiaoqiu may have his role be replaced by a light cone, but because he can take that role, you aren't shackled to preservation and can use abundance characters, which will pay off in the long term. His DOT seems worse than others in strict multipliers and has no way to trigger it on his own, but because of its uptime, he becomes one of the only good DOT characters in pure fiction, even with support builds. And if you don't have Robin and want to use Fei Xiao, it's better for Jiaoqiu to be used instead of Ron Mei. If you want to use Firefly without Ron Mei, it's better to use Jiaoqiu than it is to use Robin. Similar to Yunli, there's an element of versatility to him which makes his value higher for accounts that do not have these options. Of course, like Yunli, Jiaoqiu's versatility and comfort isn't for everyone, and most are fine with just not having him due to their established account. However, it should have always been known that Jiaoqiu was always going to be a good character due to the qualities of life he possessed, despite the numbers not saying this otherwise. As the namesake of this theorem, Jiaoqiu proves that it isn't only the numbers that it is important, but how these numbers are achieved and how reliably you can achieve it. The foundation of calcs are assumptions, and a rare unit like Jiaoqiu doesn't leave much to assume. There's very few ways you can actively influence certain endgame factors to make Jiaoqiu better or worse, and that's a good thing. Others may perform better than him or come close, but it will often have better assumptions put upon them to do so. Jiaoqiu's performance is static in a good way, thanks to his qualities of life which isn't so significant on paper, but allows him to be better in many scenarios than what calcs would suggest. And that's a couple of examples that show why calcs aren't everything. This isn't every reason, far from it actually. Like I said in the introduction, there's endgame biases which we may cover in another theorem, but for now I think we've talked long enough. Like, share, and subscribe. Do all the algorithm stuff. Let me know what else you think, why calcs aren't everything. Again, there's plenty out there and I'm sure you guys could figure out, but I've been yapping for a good while now, so I'll see you later. Bye bye.